So, for example, I believe that the fantasy of marriage is part of what destroys so many marriages in the modern age. I don't want to live in a fantasy relationship with my wife. I want to live in a very real relationship with my wife. And so I don't want my wife, for example, to think a bunch of fanciful things about the foundations of our marriage. I don't want her to think, I think you're the most beautiful woman in the world. I mean, Mila Kunis exists, and my wife knows that Mila Kunis exists. I don't believe my wife selected me on the basis that I'm the most beautiful man in the world.
Clearly.
Clearly. In some ways, believing in those sort of fanciful notions actually diminishes the value of the choice that we make in selecting our spouse. And so I want my wife to know very, very truthfully what a man is, distinct from what a woman is, what the burdens of a man are, very distinct from what the burdens of a woman are. I don't want her to live in an illusion, and I don't want to live in an illusion. But I don't tell her every time that I think a waitress is hot. That's a very specific piece of information that is my burden to carry. I don't want her... I don't want her to think that I don't think waitresses are hot, right? I don't want her to think that men are the same as women or that I'm better than I am. But I also don't want to burden her with all the particulars. And I think that's kind of part of what you're saying, is that we do have to carry part of this. I have a lot to say on the topic of marriage. You know, I've had the honor of officiating 24 or more weddings, some for people who are here, people who are very dear to me, lifelong friends. I got to pastor a church for many, many years in Los Angeles. Even our friend Laurel, who's here today, I had the honor of marrying her to her husband. And so I've had the opportunity to think a lot about if you're going to take on the responsibility of officiating a wedding, you have an obligation to try to impart some pieces of wisdom to people before you do it. And a lot of it's very practical. Don't go tit for tat. Don't keep score. You know, when you have to give each other the right to criticize one another. You can't navigate 40, 50, 60 years of life with someone who has no opportunity to criticize you. Men and women are different. You're going to have different needs. Don't try to place your reactions to something on them as though they mean what it would mean if you did the very same thing. I mean, these are very practical and I think very important, but there's a very spiritual component to it as well. And obviously the Bible has a great deal to say about it, but you can live in Ephesians for a long time talking about marriage, but there's a different idea that I'd like to leave the conversation with, which is that at the end of the day, and this is less directly stated in the Bible, but indirectly many, many times stated in the Bible, you have no real power over any other human being. If you do, it's not a God-given power. You have no right to the power that you have over them. You certainly can't change anyone for the better through coercion. You can't make someone what you want them to be. And yet there is a paradox which says, in any meaningful relationship, if you work on fulfilling your role to the best of your ability and beyond, if you work on bettering yourself, if you work on putting into a relationship all that you can, it's not a recipe that says, if you do this, it will change them. In fact, if you pursue it on that basis, it almost certainly will not work. But the paradox is, if you pursue it simply because it is the right thing to do, it has some mystical effect on the other. It's almost as though there's a God and he knows the heart of man, and he knows the difference between things that are motivated out of the good and things that are motivated out of only the selfish. And when you pursue being the best husband that you can be, it creates in your wife at least the opportunity for her to be the best wife that she can be. When you are the best wife that you can be, it creates in your husband the opportunity to be the best husband that he can be.
Very good.